A dark tide is sweeping over the Star Wars galaxy, as the long-planned invasion by the extragalactic Yuuzhan Vong has begun. The forces of Prefect Daggara and the Praetorite Vong have established a foothold on Helska and are preparing to spread throughout the Outer Rim. Welcome to Wizards and Warriors, where today we're moving from covert action to overt conflict in the Yuuzhan Vong invasion. With a war this big, we're gonna need a bigger table to plan it out. Is that a familiar thought when you're simulating things on your tabletop? Then get some more table for your table with our sponsor today, Tabletop Table. A tabletop table is a gaming surface that rises above the clutter of your usual table or anywhere else you want to put it. It's a platform for focused tabletop role-playing or board games while preserving the space underneath for all the associated bits and pieces which otherwise clutter your pitiful regular table. And best of all, it's portable. The tabletop table neatly folds up into itself such that you can take it anywhere in a lightweight carrying bag. So wherever you go, table or no, you'll have a surface to game on even when you've got half a galaxy to quest across. The table features an accessory rail around the edge to place cards, dice, drinks, whatever you need, and the accessories store away inside the table when you're done. It comes with 4 accessory pieces and can store 8 if you need more. Tabletop Table is launching on Kickstarter with a 10% discount for backers, but the campaign is about to end, so act fast to lock in your discount before June 30th. Go to tabletoptable.com/wizards, link in the description, and elevate your play with some more table for your table. After the destruction of Sernpidal, covered in our first episode, Han Solo and his youngest son Anakin returned to Lando Calrissian's mining operation on the planet Dubrillion, with the Yuuzhan Vong force trailing only a few short days behind. Lando hoped that his heavily fortified world, armed with turbolasers salvaged from Star Destroyers, would protect them as they burrowed underground with his mining equipment. Han convinced him otherwise, fearing the massive moon of Dubrillion, Destrillion, would be used against the planet the same way Dubido was against Sernpidal. The situation seemed dire. The nearest major New Republic task force, commanded by Warshak Rojo aboard his flagship, the Imperial 2 Star Destroyer Rejuvenator, was stationed 3 days away at the planet Ort Mantell, making any support in the initial defense unlikely. Lando believed that within a week, the entire New Republic fleet could respond to this threat and reinforce Dubrillion. Still, given the internal problems experienced by the New Republic, Leia doubted the Senate would be concerned with problems in the Outer Rim. This feeling would prove painfully true in the coming months and years. With the swarm of incoming Yuuzhan Vong coral skippers likely to arrive a full day before the Rejuvenator, the initial defense of Dubrillion would rely on the planetary turbolasers, the Millennium Falcon, and the hodgepodge of other fighter craft piloted by staff and volunteers on Dubrillion. This included the young Jason, Jaina, and Anakin Solo, who would be in 3 TIE Advanced fighters. Han took command of the battle, issuing orders from the Millennium Falcon and taking advantage of the planetary turbolasers whenever possible, while the Solo children handled defense in atmosphere, first tracking a squadron of coral skippers which attempted to make an attack run on the city. They then began to engage multiple enemies in Dubrillion's nearby asteroid field, which Lando had turned into an obstacle course called Lando's Folly. Using the Force, the 3 children were able to create a sort of battle mind meld, coordinated by Anakin, allowing them to fight perfectly in sync and wipe out many of the remaining coral skippers harassing the planet. The strain of maintaining this meld overwhelmed Anakin as the battle ended, forcing him to quickly jump to hyperspace before falling unconscious. Anakin was temporarily lost, but Dubrillion had been saved, and the Solo twins received a hero's welcome back on the surface, while Han and Leia moved quickly, rescuing their lost son. Meanwhile, on Helska 4, the final of the Praetorite Vong's 3 world ships had arrived. Its commanders, Prefects Mashraid and Duje Brolo, conferred with Daggara, who informed them of the tactical information gathered by Helska's Yammosk war coordinator during the Battle of Dubrillion. The key to the Yuuzhan Vong's strategy remained attempting to lure in and eliminate enemy forces before word of the true scale of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion could be assessed, limiting the galaxy's response until it was too late. Daggara and the Yammosk hoped the first attack on Dubrillion would lure not just the forces from Dubrillion itself to Helska, but also the Rejuvenator's task force, allowing a quick, decisive victory before returning to conquer Dubrillion. Luke and Mara soon arrived back at Dubrillion from their scouting at Helska, and began hatching a plan to infiltrate the Yuuzhan Vong base with Lando, Leia, and Han. Luke would take a mining vehicle from Lando's vast collection and burrow into the base. But while preparing to depart, examination of a coral skipper captured during the battle also gave the forces of the galaxy far, far away their first insights on Yuuzhan Vong's living technology. Leia's protocol droid C-3PO succeeded in deciphering the Yuuzhan Vong language, translating messages from the cognition hood of the coral skipper, the living interface used to communicate between the ship and its pilot, granting new insights into their foes and their motivations. The Rejuvenator's task force also reinforced Dubrillion, including the Rejuvenator itself, 6 new Ranger-class gunships, and a handful of other vessels. This turned out to be a mixed blessing. While the task force was a powerful collection of ships, Commander Warshak Rojo disagreed with Leia's insistence that they wait for more support. Rojo believed that with just his task force, they'd be able to get to Helska, eliminate the base, and end the threat. Leia feared that Rojo, being in contact with others in the command hierarchy or the Senate, with his confident Corellian bluster, would reassure the Corps that no serious problem existed. Their hand was somewhat forced when Luke's infiltration plan received some unexpected changes. Jaina and Jacen Solo had taken it upon themselves to steal the mining vessel and the craft it was embedded in, flying off to Helska. They hoped to spare their seriously ill Aunt Mara from having to take part in the mission, and believed that their Uncle Luke was more needed with the fleet. Han insisted on following in the Millennium Falcon, while the highly confident Rojo declared nothing on the planet could stand against the Rejuvenator setting off as well. Jaina piloted the carrier craft Merry Miner, while Jacen deployed to the planet, where he also received a mental cry for help. Following the paths through the base, disguised by the cognition hood from the captured fighter, he soon found his way to the chamber where Jedi Knight Miko Reglia and Danny Kui were being held captive and tortured. Jacen tried to get through to the tormented Miko, revealing his disguise and leading to a fight with multiple other Vong in the chamber. Miko temporarily broke the mental hold they had on him, joining Jacen in fighting the Yuuzhan Vong, sacrificing himself to take 2 warriors with him into the freezing waters of Helska. Jacen managed to defeat the others and rescued Danny, taking her back to the waiting mining craft to return to orbit. Meanwhile, Jaina was quickly set upon by coral skippers, but before the Yuuzhan Vong could destroy the Merry Miner, the Rejuvenator and its escorts entered the system. On the planet, Dagara and the Yammosk readied the various volcano-like gun emplacements on the world ships, called Yaret cores, drawing energy from Helska itself. The opening salvos seemed to go in favor of the New Republic, as the new Ranger gunships tore through Coral Skipper lines. This didn't last, as a pair of Rangers were rushed by a larger Coral Skipper variant. The large Coral Skipper began to rapidly spin, using its Dovin basal-generated black hole shields to pull in laser fire and eventually even 2 of the Rangers, making tighter and tighter orbits until the 2 gunships collided with the Coral Skipper, taking out all 3 craft and reducing the New Republic to only 4 remaining Rangers, which had proven themselves to be the most effective element of the fleet thus far. Rojo and the Rejuvenator made a run for the planet, while Jacen was still trying to escape. Still, both Rojo and Anakin on the Millennium Falcon began to be awed by the seemingly perfect coordination between the Coral Skippers. Anakin compared this to his own coordination with his siblings at Dubrillion, correctly concluding that they must be melding in a similar way, though unaware that this was the work of the Yammosk War Coordinator, which was able to effectively micromanage the battle on the Yuuzhan Vong side down to the smallest movement. The highly coordinated actions of hundreds, if not thousands, of Coral Skippers started proving too much for the remaining New Republic force. The rest of the craft tried to cover for Rejuvenator's run on the base, but a final volley from the planet-bound world ship's weapons annihilated the flagship and Rojo with it. Jacen and Danny, though, reunited with the rest of the forces in orbit, and a full retreat to Dubrillion was called. The first true battle between the New Republic and the Yuuzhan Vong had ended in disaster. It wasn't a complete loss, however. Danny Kui had managed to gather significant amounts of information on the Yuuzhan Vong in captivity, which could prove crucial in facing the invaders, including an explanation of the nature of the Yammosks. Despite their victory, Prefect Dagara's hope to eliminate all threats before they could organize, or even just spread word of their arrival, had failed. The information on the Yammosk's coordination abilities being key to Vong's success led to another daring plan being formulated by Anakin, Jacen and Danny. The fleet returned with more of Lando's eccentric business equipment, 6 massive shield ships shaped like umbrellas, which could redirect the Yuuzhan Vong's volcanic energy back at the planet, evaporating more of the ice and cooling it down, hoping to freeze the Yammosk. As they arrived in the system, the smaller craft provided cover for the massive shield ships against the remaining swarms of coral skippers. As expected, the Yammosk activated to control the battle, expending significant energy. The Yammosk incorrectly believed that the hope of the New Republic was to simply redirect energy as a way to help track Yuuzhan Vong movements or disrupt communications. The desperate ploy seemed doomed at first, with 3 shield ships quickly being destroyed. But before a 4th could fall, the coral skippers began to fall into disarray and collide with each other. The evaporation from the redirected energy had successfully frozen the Yammosk. The rapid expansion as the planet froze caused it to shatter, exploding with the Praetorite Vong advance force still on it, while the remainder of the New Republic force retreated. With the battle at Helska won, but knowing the Yuuzhan Vong were still a threat, Leia, despite swearing off a life in politics, took up the position of ambassador from Dubrillion. She hoped to push the Senate, and especially the Chief of State, a Bothan named Leia, to act. When addressing the Senate, Leia's warnings were met with not just ridicule, but outright hostility. The senators loyal to Leia believed that the battle at Helska had eliminated the remaining Yuuzhan Vong, and that Leia was engaging in a power grab, trying to cover for the controversy caused by her and the Jedi's failure at Asarian and Romamul, on top of various other grievances held against the Jedi, who were still seen as dangerous vigilantes and renegades. For some, there was an undercurrent of belief that Leia, a human, was attempting to wrest control back from the largely non-human government of Leia. While a myriad of factors were at play, the result was the historically disenfranchised Outer Rim being left to their own devices against the Yuuzhan Vong. At the same time, the government on Coruscant downplayed the severity of the situation. Despite the political stonewalling, Leia's pleas had some effect. Some more independently minded commanders, chiefly the also Bothan Trace Crefei, took her warnings to heart. His flagship, the Bothan assault cruiser Ralroost, was also the home to the famous Rogue Squadron. After running Rogue Squadron's leader, Gavin Darklighter, through simulations against the Yuuzhan Vong, the pair came up with a plan to provide incontrovertible evidence of the Yuuzhan Vong threat. They would deploy Rogue Squadron throughout the Rim on simulated pirate raids, with the rest of Crefei's force pursuing them. In reality, this above-board training exercise would hopefully be used to run across holdouts of the Yuuzhan Vong. They also established themselves at Dubrillion, where Crefei and Ralroost joined a small but growing group of Outer Rim allies. The planet Agamar had sent a small fleet of evacuation ships to assist in relocation efforts for the survivors of Sernpidal and the population of Dubrillion itself, with the knowledge that a Yuuzhan Vong attack was imminent. At the Jedi Academy on Yavin 4, Luke Skywalker had convened a gathering of all the Jedi in the galaxy, still a small number compared to their height in the Clone Wars. Divisions were beginning to show in the fledgling New Jedi Order, as some, like Kip Durran, believed they needed to take an active role in opposing the Yuuzhan Vong, taking the fight to the invaders, while others believed they first needed to foster cooperation with the New Republic. Luke stressed the need for unity, and the Jedi began to organize missions to learn as much about the Yuuzhan Vong as possible. Most important were one to Belkadan, where Luke and Jason went, and one to Dantooine, where Mara Jade Skywalker and Anakin Solo went. Anakin and Mara's trip was primarily about recovery for the pair, with Mara still suffering from her mysterious illness, and Anakin feeling responsible for Chewbacca's death. The two soon began to form a friendship with a tribe of the local Dantari, a humanoid species with primitive technology indigenous to the world. One evening, Anakin felt a flash of fear and pain from the Dantari camp, scouting it to discover that the Yuuzhan Vong were present on the planet, terrorizing the Dantari. Anakin fought and killed 2 Yuuzhan Vong warriors at the camp, though the true extent of their presence was still unknown. On Belkadan, Jason and Luke Skywalker scouted the Excal facility, trying to find whatever information they could on the Yuuzhan Vong biotes left behind. They came across a horrifying new discovery: civilians who had been enslaved by the Vong using implanted organisms that gave the Yuuzhan Vong control over them. The planet had been turned into a ship womb, with the new biome created by Yomin Kar's bug swarm being ideal for growing new coral skippers, while the local inhabitants were turned into slave labor, tending the growing craft. Luke warned Jason that rescuing the slaves would endanger their mission, but while the Elder Jedi slept, his apprentice snuck away to free them. He was quickly confronted by the slave's overseer and engaged him in a duel. Jason was surprised to find that his lightsaber couldn't cut through the living Vondoon crab armor of the Yuuzhan Vong, nor could the living snake-like amphistaff wielded by the Vong be cut by his energy blade. Having been caught so unaware, Jacen was defeated and taken captive. Luke managed to find and free his apprentice before he was implanted with his own slave seed, and the pair retreated, heading for Dantooine as well. On Dubrillion, helpful as the Agamarian evacuation ships were, they were insufficient to carry all refugees. Ralroost, as the most powerful ship, would be protecting the rear of the convoy as they departed the planet, but Crayfay decided they had no choice but to also carry many of the refugees on board. Rogue Squadron was stationed between the convoy and Dubrillion's asteroid belt while the evacuation was carried out. But as the ships began to depart, a large Yuuzhan Vong Mid Roik warship appeared from between the asteroids. The Praetorite Vong, who had been responsible for most prior attacks, were largely destroyed at Helska. This new force belonged to Domain Shai, commanded by Shadao Shai. While Ralroost fended off coral skipper runs on the convoy ships, Darklighter led Rogue Squadron, including the newly minted Rogue 11 Jaina Solo, in their own attack on the Mid Roik. The Mid Roik began a long-range assault on the convoy ships, firing its Yarat cores at a distance which would normally be ineffectual. But because of the huge mass of the convoy ships, and the predictable flight path as they made their way for a jump vector to Agamar, it was successfully making enough contact to do serious damage. The Rogues made a daring run to take out some of its weapons with their proton torpedoes, but the Mid Roik was too large to be destroyed outright, and it began to use its Dovin vassals to create a gravity well blocking the exit to Agamar. Instead, the convoy charted a new course, avoiding the Mid Roik's path and taking the surviving members to a new destination, Dantooine. Under the oversight of Leia and Crayfay, the refugees were able to set up a camp on Dantooine quickly, but all knew the danger remained. Dantooine was further removed from the core and held even fewer escape routes than Dubrillion. Elsewhere on the planet, Anakin and Mara were on the run from a group of Yuuzhan Vong, who were, unbeknownst to the convoy, already present on the planet. The pair were rescued by the timely arrival of Luke Skywalker and Jacen Solo, who revealed a Force vision had led them to Dantooine. On their way in, Luke and Jacen had also seen another threat, a Yuuzhan Vong ship deploying troop carriers, planning to assault Leia's camp, and so the foursome quickly made way to help prepare a defense. Ralroost was no longer present, although Rogue Squadron, Tough Squadron, Savage Squadron, and some of the armed refugee ships remained, alongside New Republic soldiers and the Jedi. The Yuuzhan Vong had multiple columns of warriors, supported by a horde of enslaved lizard-like beings called Chesrach, one of the few other surviving species from the Yuuzhan Vong's home galaxy. These enslaved forces were being controlled by a large creature called a thrall herder, coordinating them through their implants, similar to how the Yammosk at Helska controlled the coral skippers. After some initial planning, Rogue and the other fighter squadrons began strafing runs on the incoming Yuuzhan Vong warriors and their coral skipper support, employing a new tactic devised by Jaina Solo when it came to attacking the Dovin Basal-equipped vehicle analogs and fighters. The Dovin Basals created black holes to intercept projectiles, but Jaina realized that by detonating munitions slightly early, the Dovin Basal would be unable to prevent the damage from the shockwave. Shuttles and refugee ships were carving through the approaching Yuuzhan Vong and Chesrach, but the sheer volume of enemy soldiers was too high, and they were soon upon the camp. Luke, Jacen and Anakin held the line with their limited number of New Republic soldiers, in a defense characterized by Luke as pure slaughter, slowly but surely wearing down the New Republic forces. The turning point came with a new plan from Luke himself. When the Thrall Herder's Dovin Basals were creating voids to absorb fire, Luke began manipulating one of the voids with the Force, repositioning it so that the creature was absorbed by his own Dovin Basals, eliminating the Yuuzhan Vong's key strategic asset and freeing the Chesrach from its control, sending them into a disorganized frenzy, attacking friend and foe alike. In orbit, the coral skippers had also been cleared, allowing the refugee ships to attempt to evacuate yet again. They found their progress blocked by a Yuuzhan Vong cruiser, using its Dovin Basals to interdict travel away from the planet. Fortunately, Ralroost arrived back in the system, escorted by the Victory 1 Star Destroyer Karuska Fire, which unloaded its missiles on the Yuuzhan Vong cruiser, forcing a Yuuzhan Vong retreat and allowing the refugees on Dantooine to escape. The true war was beginning between the Yuuzhan Vong and those forces of the New Republic willing to heed Leia's warnings. Much remained to be done to convince the government of the New Republic to step in, and it was anyone's guess how dire the situation would get before they were forced to take heed. The impact of these continued internal conflicts on any ability to mount an effective response to the growing Yuuzhan Vong threat, and the arrival of unexpected allies will be the topic of our next episode. Please consider liking, subscribing, and clicking the bell to be notified when that and other videos on the Wizards and Warriors channel are released. Don't forget to comment. We'll try to read and respond to every comment, as we want to know what you think about this video and which videos you hope to see in the future. This is the Wizards and Warriors channel, and we'll catch you on the next one.